Good afternoon and welcome to our TV show after a brief summer break. We hope you had a pleasant summer. We use this summer break as an opportunity to research and create new content for you. I'm your host, Ergün Kırlıkovalı, and I will be with you every Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You're welcome to send me your feedback at mythsandrealities.com. Dr. Gwyn Dyer, a London-based independent journalist, wrote this in 1976. I quote, "The deafening drumbeat of propaganda and the sheer lack of sophistication in argument, which comes from preaching decade after decade to a convinced and emotionally committed audience, are the major handicaps of Armenian historiography of the diaspora today," unquote. In March 2015, an email solicitation appeared in my inbox. It said Stanford University's Global Studies Division was offering a travel grant opportunity for students with an interest in human rights and or conflict resolution, and whose research or academic pursuits would benefit from their participation. The grantees would attend a conference in Istanbul in April 2015. Nothing wrong with any of this, of course, until I read the next line, which aroused deep feelings of disappointment, sadness, and resentment in me. Project 2015, Armenian Genocide Centennial Commemoration. Now, if the announcement said Turkish-Armenian conflict, it would be factual, honest, and fair. So I wrote back and asked SGS a simple question. How can you be so sure that it was genocide? This simple but poignant question was posed by one of the presiding judges of the Grand Chamber of the European Court of Human Rights during the Perinçek versus Switzerland trial, to the lawyers defending the official Armenian narrative during the January 28, 2015 appeal hearings in Strasbourg. It sums it all up, doesn't it? The United Nations 1948 Convention on Prevention and Punishment of Genocide provides the definition of genocide and what acts constitute one, but also stipulates that A, intent to destroy shall be proven, Article 2, B, by following due process, Article 5, and C, at a competent tribunal, Article 6. Such was never done in the case of Turkish-Armenian conflict over the 2015 events, and no court verdict exists saying it is genocide. To call it one anyway would be defrauding the unsuspecting public. The kangaroo courts of occupied Istanbul, 1919 to 1920, designed to settle political scores, lacked due process. Malta tribunals, 1919 to 1921, were abandoned by the Crown prosecutors because no evidence could be found which could withstand the scrutiny of the courtroom. And the 1916 Ottoman courts martial, actually prosecuted some of its own military personnel for mistreating Armenians and proving in the process that temporary relocation, or terreset for short, could not have been genocide. In a landmark decision, the ECHR stated on December 17, 2013, and I quote, "The existence of a genocide, which was a precisely defined legal concept, was not easy to prove. We doubt that there could be a general consensus, given that historical research was by definition open to discussion and a matter of debate. without necessarily giving rise to a final conclusion, unquote. The ECHR created a legal precedent of inadmissibility of any comparison between the Holocaust and the Armenian claims, as the latter lacks what the former clearly has: concrete historical facts, clear legal basis, and existence of the acts that had been found by an international court to be clearly established, unquote. Thus, indirectly, the majority of the ECHR judges ruled that Armenian claims cannot be classified as genocide, although they were not set out to judge whether 1915 events could be classified as genocide or not. Mutual suffering, shared pain, and fair memory are the operative words here. Only they can lead to a civilized dialogue, honest debate, and joint narrative, eventually leading to peace and closure. When one refers to 1915 as genocide, one deliberately dismisses the three momentous events that caused the Terraset Order of May 31st, 1915 by the Ottoman government. 1. By December 1914, Armenian revolutionaries have already killed 120,000 Muslims, mostly Turkish. Source: page 34 of the book titled The Macmillan Dictionary of First World War by Pope and Wheel, published in London in 1995. 2. Sarıkamış defeat. It is no secret that Ottoman Armenian traitors helped Russian armies invade northeastern Anatolia, while other Armenians took part in those Russian armies. The Ottoman Third Army lost about 80,000 soldiers in that campaign, and it halted the Turkish advance into the Caucasus. Source: page 195 of the book titled The Genocide of Truth by Şükrü Server Aya, published in Istanbul in 2008. And 3. On April 19th, 1915, Armenians revolted in the city of Van. By 17th of May, same year, they have killed 194,000 Ottoman Muslims, mostly destroying the Muslim quarters of the city of Van. They then presented the key to the city to the Russian commander of the invading Russian armies. Source: page 246 of the book titled Rebellion at Van by McCarthy, Arslan, Tashkaran, and Turan, published by the University of Utah in 2006. Adding these numbers yields about 2% of the Ottoman population in 1915 killed by Armenians. Imagine 2% of the US, or 6 million Americans about, being killed by some insurgents on American soil. What would America do? The Ottoman government decided to temporarily relocate the logistics base. The Armenian community was not totally moved, though, as craftsmen, soldiers, doctors, nurses, as well as Armenians of Catholic or Protestant persuasion were spared. Also spared were those Armenians who lived in Western cities like Istanbul, Izmir, Edirne, and others. This alone proves that it was no genocide, as the intent was to mitigate a wartime threat to homeland security. If we cannot be fair, think rationally, and engage in a reasoned debate, then all we have is an ill-advised travel program cultivating bias, hatred, and more polarization, like the Project 2015 SGS is supporting. Where is the Turkish suffering at the hands of Armenian revolutionaries in the official Armenian narrative based on an alleged genocide? The scholar who had sent me, or sent the grant notice, responded with a copy of her previous clarification letter that she sent to the Turkish Students Association and asked me not to jump to conclusions about the academic nature of the funding opportunity and her personal views about 1915. She requested that I share her message with the Pax Turkica Google groups I had CC'd in my original message in order to ensure full dissemination of her clarification note. I obliged, of course, with the following response to her. But first, let me share with you her clarification letter. She pointed out in that letter that the conference was not organized by Mediterranean Studies or SGS. Yet, 2 Stanford faculty members would be participating in the Project 2015 activities, which included, according to her, an academic, not a political or ideological conference. She failed to disclose by whom the conference was organized. An online research revealed that the conference was organized by a fringe group called Durde, which is supportive of the PKK, the Kurdistan Workers' Party, designated as a terrorist organization by Turkey, the United States, and the European Union. Durde uses any opportunity to disparage the established authority in Turkey, and the commemoration of an alleged Armenian genocide is just such an opportunity. Going back to Stanford Scholar's letter, she said she fully understood the sensitivities raised by some of the Turkish respondents. Yet, as an academic, she has seen how arguments of civility and sensitivity are often used to subvert critical thinking and learning opportunities. Please note that phrase she used, critical thinking. We will come back to that. She asked how would the respondents feel if they heard that a scholar of Palestinian or Jewish origin was banished for trying to study Jewish opposition to Zionism, or that a grandchild of a decorated Nazi officer is prevented from studying Auschwitz or the living conditions in Gaza. Could such criticisms be justified by political, cultural, personal sensitivities? She asked. Armenian press, again not surprisingly, hailed the event in an article titled Stanford Students to Participate in an Armenian Genocide Commemoration in Istanbul. A Turk-bashing, one-sided conference at Bilgi University was organized with the co-sponsorship of UCLA's who else? Armenian History Chair, totally ignoring Armenian war crimes, hate crimes, revolts, terrorism, and treason, resulting in enormous Turkish suffering. I shared her clarification letter, as she requested, with the members of Pax Turkica, an invitation-only online think tank established in 2008 by Turkish academicians, diplomats, activists, and other professionals of all scientific disciplines and nationalities, supporting exploration of controversial matters via research, reasoned debate, and civilized dialogue. In my response, I pointed out how the 2 words, namely Armenian genocide, defying critical thinking, have come to symbolize a profound prejudice involving pro-Armenian, anti-Turkish, and anti-Islam sentiments, well entrenched through persistency of views. There is no legal basis or historical evidence for that phrase. I can remember as recently as in early 1980s when major newspapers, including Los Angeles Times, used the qualifier alleged before genocide in their reporting to be objective and fair. That practice, unfortunately, has pretty much disappeared since then, And what caused this drastic change? Did some new research unearth heretofore unknown information or groundbreaking evidence? No. Did some mass graves come into public awareness to support the genocide label? No. In fact, just the reverse happened. Some mass graves in Zeve and Erzurum were found to contain remains of Muslim dead, as indicated by the Islamic artifacts found next to them by anthropologists. So, why this drastic change from alleged to foregone conclusion? I noticed you mentioned critical thinking in your letter. I happen to have read Karen Hoffman's book, Psychology in Action, which covers that subject. I found that none of the three components of critical thinking, namely emotional, intellectual, or behavioral, are complied with in the claim that 1915 events constitute a genocide. Let's start with emotional components of critical thinking. Valuing truth over self-interest. Reading Papazian's 1934 book, Patriotism Perverted, one realizes that just the opposite seems to be true. Accepting change. Have you ever heard of Armenians condemning Armenian terrorism? The first Prime Minister of Armenia, Kachaznouni, made this point about Armenians' inability to change in his 1923 address to the Armenian revolutionaries. Then there's empathizing. Check the reaction of the Armenian communities to murdered diplomats. Gunther's 1986 book, Pursuing the Just Cause of Their People, a study of contemporary Armenian terrorism, provides a scholarly background for that. Welcoming divergent views. Turkish point of view is not solicited, invited, or allowed in genocide panels. You know why? If you read the book, McCarthy's 2010 book, The Turk in America, Creation of an Enduring Prejudice. Tolerating ambiguity. The only toleration of ambiguity was the qualifier alleged before genocide, and that was abandoned for no good reason in the last 30, 40 years as a result of Armenian political pressure. Dubrin, 2018 book called Tolerating Ambiguity, coupled with Atayev's 2008 book titled Armenian Falsifications, will help one achieve this skill. Recognizing personal biases. Just look at the comments in the Armenian newspapers concerning Turks and Muslims. Feigel's 1986 book, A Myth of Terror, Armenian Extremism, Its Causes and Its Historical Context, offers a good backdrop. Then let's review the following intellectual components of critical thinking. Thinking independently, for example. If Project 2015 truly supported the scholarly exploration of a controversial matter, it would name its conference Turkish-Armenian Conflict, not genocide. And it would be correct, honest, and fair. Aya's 2011 book, The Genocide of Truth, covers this issue in detail. Then there is this, defining problems accurately. How is that possible if genocide adherents insist on starting the clock in 1915? What about Armenian insurgencies since 1862? You might read Nalbandian's 1963 book, The Armenian Revolutionary Movement, The Development of Armenian Political Parties through the 19th Century, to realize the scope and depth of Armenian revolts, terrorism, and treason. Next is analyzing date for value and content. Most genocide proponents cannot read or write Ottoman Turkish, and almost all of them ignore or dismiss Ottoman and Turkish archives, although they are open in mid-1980s to public. And researchers from more than 100 countries already made use of them. Uras's magnificent work, updated posthumously in 1988, the 1,000-page book titled The Armenians in History and the Armenian Question, provides an insightful look at the subject. Next is employing a variety of thinking processes in problem solving. Here is one. How about emphasizing more academic research, peer review, and scholarly debate instead of forcing everyone to toe the party line? Güçlü's remarkable 2012 book titled The Holocaust and the Armenian Case in Comparative Perspective might be a good starting point. Next is synthesizing. Combining various elements into meaningful pattern is not happening with the genocide accusations, as Armenian insurgency, terrorism, revolts, and treason are simply uncritically dismissed. See, for example, Turkish Atase archival documents covering World War I, complete with police reports and eyewitness accounts. Next, resisting overgeneralizations. The official Armenian narrative paints a simplistic black and white picture of 1915, with Armenians as poor, starving Armenians and Turks as mindless murderers. A cursory review of the 2006 book by ARF called Hashamatyan of the Armenian Revolutionary Federation Centennial Album Atlas, Volume 1, Epic Battles, will reveal massive confessions by the Armenian leaders themselves that they had planned and executed a brutal war against the Ottoman Empire. This is what the Armenians themselves are saying. Reflective thinking. That is to say, I don't know why I believe that, I will have to think about it. This is another missing link in the genocide advocates' approach to the Turkish-Armenian conflict. The scholarly article by Tajar and Gain, titled State, Identity, Continuity, and Responsibility in Response to Partisan Claims by an Armenian Writer, will make you rethink your position. Finally, let's take a look at the behavioral components of critical thinking. Delaying judgment until adequate data are available. A vast majority of the Ottoman archives and almost all of the Armenian archives have not been looked at. Do you think it's still proper to call 1915 a genocide? Çiçek, Özdemir, Turan, Çalık, and Halaçoğlu's 2004 book titled Exile and Migration will make honest truth seekers consider the conventional wisdom. Employing precise terms, discovering precise shades of meaning is crucial in any genocide debate. I do not care if there is a court verdict or not. To me, it is genocide. How many times did you hear that? Is every killing genocide? Why did the UN create an international court of justice as the sole prosecutor of the genocide charges? Why? Salt's 2008 book called The Unmaking of the Middle East might provide a valuable new insight. Next, gathering data. How can scholars gather data if the Turkish archives are open but shunned out of bias, and Armenian archives are all but inaccessible? Halaçoğlu's 2002 book called Facts on the Relocation of Armenians will scholarly provide the other side of the story. Distinguishing fact from opinion. Is the alleged Armenian genocide a fact, a belief, or an opinion? Does the answer depend on who you talk to? hardly satisfies critical thinking. McCarthy's 1995 book, Death in Exile, is a game-changing revelation, encouraging dialogue, critical dialogue. Armenians systematically exclude or deny access to the Turkish point of view in panels. Özdemir and Serenay's 2003 book titled Turkish-Armenian Conflict documents can start a long overdue civilized dialogue on this controversy. Listening actively. In the few cases where scholars with views close to Armenian or Turkish narratives got engaged in a dialogue, the debate quickly decomposed into shouting matches. McCarthy, Arslan, Tashkran, and Turan's 2006 book named The Armenian Rebellion at Van will explain why. Modifying judgments in light of new information. Many scholars published their research disputing the official Armenian narrative. How much of that enormous body of new information is used by genocide advocates? See, for example, Erickson's insightful 2013 book titled Ottomans and Armenians, a study in counterinsurgency. Applying knowledge to new situations, how can one master this skill if one constantly subjected to a drumbeat of flawed genocide narrative? Please read Louis' 2005 book titled A Disputed Genocide. After analyzing all of the components, do you really think inviting students to a partisan project named Armenian Genocide conforms to the norms of critical thinking, dear Stanford professor? Wouldn't it be better to call it alleged Armenian genocide, or disputed genocide, or enduring debate, or simply 100-year-old Turkish-Armenian conflict? Do you now appreciate why I was disappointed when Project 2015 conference was named after an alleged genocide and you kept referring to the same? I got no response to my second letter from the Stanford scholar. It was not the first time when a scholar was seriously challenged on his or her adamant position on and chose to stay silent. Lack of critical thinking, among other things, has caused the Turkish-Armenian conflict to smolder for a century. I'm afraid if the blind addiction to the obviously flawed Armenian genocide claims continues, this issue will fester for another century. Thank you for joining me. I will see you next week at yet another episode of Myths and Realities. In the meantime, my work to unearth the truth, to be the voice of the silent victim, goes on.